Have you ever felt that strange moment when something in your life shifts unexpectedly? A change so sudden that you wonder if it's a sign, a message, a reminder you can no longer ignore. Because sometimes, what happens to you isn't just an event. It's a trigger, a turning point, an urgent call that Allah places in your path to transform your life. Immediately. What if what you're experiencing right now isn't a coincidence, but the beginning of a change you never saw coming? Stay attentive, because what you're about to hear can shed light on exactly what you're going through. There comes a moment in a believer's life when everything around them falls silent. A moment no one sees, no one understands, but you feel it deep in your soul. It's not a sound. It's not a vision. It's not something you can explain. It's a feeling, a strange feeling, as if the air had changed, as if something invisible brushed against you and called softly without a word. You go on with your day, you might smile, you talk, you move forward, but your heart has sensed something that doesn't come from within you. It's that precise moment when you realize your life is no longer entirely stable. Not on the surface, you can manage that, but in the depths, in those places in your soul that you hide even from yourself, as if an inner movement were beginning to stir, and you couldn't stop it. You felt this before, haven't you? That feeling that something is about to change radically, not in a week, not in a year, but soon, very soon. You don't know if it's a door that will open, or a door that will close. You don't know if it's a gift, or a trial. You don't know if you'll have to let go of something, or cling to something you had ignored, and that's when your mind starts to spin. You question your emotions, your decisions, your relationships, your past mistakes, your regrets, your intentions. Everything becomes heavier, denser, more real, as if Allah, in His wisdom, were tightening your focus around a specific point. A point you might have been trying to avoid. A point you didn't want to look at. A point you can no longer ignore. There are days when you feel life pushing you in a direction you didn't choose. You want to resist, but it's like fighting an invisible tide. You want to carry on as before, but your heart tells you it's no longer possible. You want to pretend everything is fine, but your soul keeps telling you something's wrong, that something's slipping away, that something's coming. And deep down, a question crosses your mind. What if what I'm feeling isn't just a feeling? What if it's a calling? What if it's Allah's way of reminding me that my path needs to change now? You remain silent. You almost feel watched, but not in an oppressive way. No. Gently, lovingly, as if a presence were guiding you toward a truth you could no longer hear because of the noise of your life. Because sometimes Allah doesn't speak to you with words. He speaks to you through subtle shifts, through sudden emotions, through blockages you don't understand, through unexpected ease, through thoughts that return again and again until you finally recognize them. This inner upheaval that surprises you. Perhaps it's not worry. Perhaps it's not stress. Perhaps it's not a coincidence. It could be a realignment, a reorientation, a kind of energy you don't know, but that attracts you, pushes you, corrects you without being abrupt. And you feel it. You feel it in your breath. In that strange way, your heart beats a little faster when you think about certain things. In that heaviness that arises when you stray from what you know to be right. In that inexplicable calm that settles over you when you consider a change you've been putting off for far too long. It's as if Allah is gently guiding you back to a central point in your life. A point you must return to, a point you've neglected, a point your soul yearns for, even if your mind refuses to acknowledge it. And that point,
You feel it approaching. You feel its weight. You feel its importance. You feel that everything you're experiencing right now, the tensions, the hesitations, the emotions, has only one purpose: to make you confront what you've been avoiding for so long. It's a feeling few people understand. But you know. You know it's not normal. You know this isn't just a phase. You know you're being called, that you're being brought back, that you're being prepared. Because something is coming. Something that might turn your life upside down, or illuminate it with a light you no longer expected. And what you're about to discover, you might not have been ready to hear it until now. But now, pay close attention to what comes next. Imagine this night. Not an ordinary night, a night when the world seems to hold its breath, a night when the wind no longer blows, when the streets are empty, when even the lights seem hesitant to shine. The sky is heavy, gray, almost crushing. The kind of sky that makes you feel small, tiny, fragile. It seems to be preparing something. It seems to be watching. In this silent setting, he walks. Not fast, not slow. He walks like someone who no longer has the strength to run, but too much torment to stop. His footsteps echo on the cold ground. Every sound bounces off the walls of the sleeping buildings. It seems as if the city itself is listening, as if it's waiting for him to understand something he still refuses to see. This man, he's not bad. He's not lost by choice. He simply carries years of weight on his shoulders, years of decision he wishes he could erase, years of interrupted prayers, of undigested regrets, of nights spent trying to ignore the voice telling him to come back. If you saw him, you'd think he was just like everyone else. A normal face, a normal demeanor. But his soul is in turmoil. It's like a heart that has fought against itself for too long. And at night, he isn't walking to think. He's walking to run away. Run away from his thoughts. Run away from his mistakes. Run away from this feeling that has been catching up with him for days, maybe weeks. This feeling that something is approaching, something he can no longer push away. The sound of his footsteps, however, eventually synchronizes with something deeper. A heartbeat, a rhythm. The pounding of his heart, heavy and insistent. He breathes heavily. He stares at the ground. He doesn't look up at the sky because he knows that if he raises his eyes, if he dares to face this silence, he will feel the truth he has been trying to avoid for so long. He keeps walking, but suddenly, something inside him breaks. Not a sound, not a jolt, nothing visible. But he feels it clearly. An inner lock has just given way. He stops, abruptly, as if his legs refuse to take another step. He looks around. There is no one. No one in the streets. No one at the windows. No one to witness this moment, and yet he doesn't feel alone. Not this time. It's strange. An invisible presence. A gentle yet firm sensation. Not something that frightens you. Something that reminds you that you are not abandoned, even in your deepest silences. He places a hand on her chest. His heart races as if it wants to speak to her. As if this heaviness, accumulated over years, has finally decided to manifest itself. A weight he can no longer ignore, no longer hide behind a smile or distractions. It's not fatigue. It's not anxiety. It's something else. Something that comes from a place deeper than emotions. A movement that resembles neither fear nor thought. More like a message, but a message without words. He closes his eyes. He breathes. The silence of the night becomes almost deafening. It's as if the world is holding its breath, letting him hear what he refuses to acknowledge. Your life can't go on like this. He sees himself again in his mind. Those years when he postponed faith, those moments when he felt himself drifting away but chose to look away. Those days when he ignored the feeling of emptiness, thinking everything would sort itself out. But nothing sorted itself out. On the contrary, every mistake, every oversight piled up like stones he carries in his soul. And this weight he thought he could bear for years to come, he understands now that it wasn't placed there to punish him, but to stop him before he collapses. He opens his eyes. The street is still empty, but the night feels different, as if she had just revealed something to him. He doesn't speak. He doesn't need words, even less justifications. He knows. For the first time in a long time, he knows that this heaviness is no accident. It's not chaos. It's not bad luck. It's not an unfair ordeal. It's an invisible hand that has rested upon him and said, "Stop. Look at yourself. You can no longer move forward as before." And this understanding, so sudden, so intense, it strikes him like a truth he should have heard much sooner. A truth that will force him to confront what he has been running from. A truth that can no longer wait. Because what comes after this night, he's absolutely not ready to imagine it. There are signs in your life that you no longer notice. Not because you're blind, but because you're exhausted. Exhausted from thinking, exhausted from feeling, exhausted from always having to be strong, even when your heart is screaming in the silence. You move forward. You do what you have to do. You smile when people are watching. But inside, there's this whisper, this little vibration that you ignore. You call it stress, fatigue, a difficult phase. You give it names to reassure yourself. But this feeling, it comes back. It comes back when everything calms down, when night falls, when the distractions disappear. It comes back in that moment when your soul is alone with itself. And you don't want to admit it, but you know that this feeling didn't arise by chance. There are shifts in your life that aren't just events. A friend who suddenly drifts away. A project that falls through even though it seemed perfect. A path that blocks you for no reason. A door you desperately wanted to go through that slams shut. You ask yourself, why me? Why now? Why like this? But you don't realize that sometimes what you call injustice, what you call failure, what you call abandonment, is actually just a protection you refuse to see, because you see the loss. But Allah sees what would have destroyed you. You see the closure, but He sees the path you'll never take as long as that door remains open. You see the blockage, but He sees the place where you would have been shattered. You cry out in your heart, "Why are they taking away what I love?" But you don't know that sometimes they take away what prevents you from truly breathing. You ask, why are they depriving me of what comforted me? But you don't know that what comforted you was lulling you to sleep. You haven't noticed that some losses happen at the exact moment you begin to drift too far from yourself. At the precise moment, your heart slowly hardens. At the moment your soul grows heavy without you even realizing it. Allah doesn't let you drift without sending shocks. But these shocks, they are never like what you imagine. They don't come with lightning or words written in the sky. They come with a detail, a pause, an unexpected event, a pain that forces you to sit down, a void that compels you to reflect, a silence that cuts you off from everything that distracted you. There are times when Allah stops you in such a subtle way, so delicate, that if you don't listen to your heart, you miss it. But sometimes, you don't pay attention. You carry on with your life as if these tremors were merely isolated incidents. You refuse to believe they have meaning. You refuse to believe your soul is crying out for help. So Allah intensifies the signal, not to hurt you, not to punish you, but so that you finally hear what you refuse to listen to. Because there comes a time when a soul no longer hears with gentleness. It no longer hears with subtle warnings. It no longer hears with intuitions. She needs a shock. You've surely experienced that shock, that moment when everything stops, when the world loses its color, when you freeze as if life has just snatched something essential from you. An unexpected breakup, a brutal loss, a painful humiliation, a financial collapse, an inexplicable inner crisis. And you wonder why. Why now? Why this way? But what you haven't understood is that sometimes the shock is mercy in disguise. Protection that takes the form of pain. A light that burns before it shines. Because if he didn't shake you up, you would continue to drift away. 1 inch a day, one detail a week, one innocent oversight after another. And the alienation of a soul isn't visible to the naked eye. It's felt in the heaviness of the heart, in spiritual coldness, in the lack of flavor in life, in the feeling of being surrounded yet alone, in the loss of desire, in mechanical prayers, in empty days, in long nights. So sometimes, to save you, Allah takes something away, not to punish you, to awaken you. Because without this awakening, you would have continued to drift away without realizing it. And when the shock arrives, immediately, brutally, you feel lost, broken, misunderstood. But what you don't yet realize is that this moment you consider the end, may only be the beginning. A beginning that starts right where you thought you were going to collapse. And if you knew what awaits you beyond that point, you might look at what comes next in a different light.
Life, sometimes, feels like a desert so vast you lose track of which way you're walking. You move forward, step by step, believing you're in control. You tell yourself you know the way, that you have a plan, that you know where you're going. But what you don't notice is that the sand beneath your feet is changing. With every step, almost imperceptibly. At first, the ground is firm, stable. You lean on it confidently. You move forward with the illusion that everything is under control. You tell yourself everything will be all right, that you can manage on your own, that your story depends only on you. But the further you walk, the more treacherous the sand becomes. You don't realize it. You continue as if nothing has changed. You walk on shifting dunes, convincing yourself that the ground is still the same. And yet, your foot sinks a little deeper with each step. 1 centimeter, then another, then another. You think you're making progress. In reality, you're sinking slowly, silently, like someone drifting away from themselves without even realizing it. There comes a moment, and you know it well, when you begin to feel that something is wrong. Your breathing quickens. Your heart grows heavy. You stop for a second, but you refuse to admit that you're lost. So you keep going, as if denying reality would change it. The desert is immense, overwhelming. It doesn't shout anything at you, but it sends you signals. The sand that slips, the heat that beats down, the silence that becomes oppressive. And then suddenly, it happens. A wind. Not an ordinary wind. Not a warm breeze rustling through your clothes. No. A violent wind. A wind that sweeps everything around you. A wind that whips up the sand like a stormy sea. A wind that almost tears you away from yourself. You panic. You curl up into a ball. You close your eyes. You hold your breath.
You're afraid of being erased. Afraid of being swallowed by this storm that seems intent on taking everything away. You scream inwardly, "Why now? Why like this? Why this wind against me?" You cling to what you can, to what you know, to what reassures you, to ties, to habits, to attachments you don't want to let go of. You tell yourself that if this wind has come, it's because you deserve chaos, because you have sinned, because you haven't been good enough, because you haven't been strong enough. But you are wrong. This wind is not here to erase you. It hasn't come to engulf or destroy you. It is not the enemy you imagine. This wind could be the most powerful mercy you have ever received. A mercy unlike gentle sunsets or calm days. A harsh, brutal, necessary mercy. Because sometimes, gentleness is no longer enough. Sometimes, a heart that has grown too heavy can only be awakened by a shock. Sometimes, a soul too attached must be shaken to release what holds it to the ground. Look at what the wind does in a desert. It sweeps away the tracks. It shifts the dunes. It erases the paths you thought were permanent. It changes the shape of the world around you. What frightens you is that you think you're losing your bearings. But what you don't yet see is that those bearings were no longer good for you. You were clinging to things that were suffocating you, to choices that were devouring you from within, to paths that were leading you away from yourself, to people who were weakening your heart without even realizing it. The wind doesn't come to uproot you. It comes to lighten your load. It sweeps away, gust after gust, the accumulated dust of your years of mistakes, the illusions you called stability, the false securities to which you had become attached. That wind, it sets you free. It clears the path you no longer saw. It tears away what you thought was essential, but which had held you back for far too long. It's painful. Yes. Because everything that's taken from you leaves a mark on your heart. But sometimes, a mark is the beginning of healing. The desert around you transforms. The storm passes. The sand settles. And you finally open your eyes. You look around. Nothing is the same as before. The dunes have changed. The landscape is different. Yesterday's path is gone. And you wonder, what is this new path that I never noticed? You don't know yet. But what you're about to discover right after this wind could be the thing you've been searching for years without ever daring to admit it.
There are moments in your life when everything suddenly changes. You wake up one morning and without understanding why, everything seems different. Heavier, darker, more unstable. And the first question that crosses your mind, almost like an inner scream, is, why is my life suddenly getting so complicated? Why is everything collapsing just when I was trying to get back on my feet? Why now? You ask this question with pain, with weariness, with the feeling of having reached a limit you can no longer surpass. And what you don't realize is that the answer isn't in what's happening to you. It's in who you are becoming. Because sometimes, complication isn't a punishment. It's a reminder, a recalibration, a subtle but urgent way to guide you back to a direction you had abandoned without even realizing it. The truth? You were drifting away. Not visibly. Not abruptly. No. You were drifting away a millimeter a day. You were drifting away in your mind, in your priorities, in your intentions, into that silent spiritual weariness that had been gnawing at you for so long.
Your heart was growing heavy, not with a weight others might notice, but with a weight only you feel when you lay your head on the pillow, when the world falls silent, when there are no more distractions to drown out what your soul is trying to tell you. You couldn't hear anything anymore, because you heard everything around you except what was essential. The expectations of others, the pressure to succeed, the fear of disappointing, the escape into pleasure, the confusion of choices, the noise of the world that distanced you from the sound of your own heart. Then the question returns, more insistent, more painful. Why is this happening now? Why is everything shutting down all at once? Why this crisis, this breakup, this loss, this pain? Why so fast? And the answer is almost always the same. Because sometimes gentleness is no longer enough. Because when a soul falls into too deep sleep, it doesn't awaken with a whisper. It awakens with a shock. Because when you walk towards something that will break you, Allah removes the rug from under your feet before you are completely shattered. It hurts. But it saves you from even greater pain, because the danger was too close, too silent, too invisible for you to spot it on your own. Then life turns around, immediately, quickly, brutally, not to crush you, but to pull you from a path that would have destroyed you more slowly, more deeply, more definitively. You still wonder, why is this change so sudden? Why this abrupt break? Why this feeling of inner rupture, as if something is detaching itself from me? The answer could be, because some transformation need to be rapid, very rapid. A heart can decay silently for years, until the day it needs immediate intervention to prevent it from dying completely. A soul can accumulate so much dust that it would take an earthquake to shake it entirely. Destiny can veer off course by a few degrees until it leads to a completely different life. And sometimes Allah brings you back all at once, with a single jolt, because you can't go on like this. Because if the change were gradual, you wouldn't even notice it. You'd say, it'll pass. You'd put it off. You'd continue clinging to what's dragging you down. So sometimes, the change has to be immediate. Not because you're being punished, but because you're being protected. And there's still one question you ask yourself in the secret of your heart. The one you don't even dare ask aloud. Why do I feel so alone in this storm? Why doesn't anyone understand what I'm going through? Why does this pain feel so personal? And the answer might be deeper than you imagine. Because this message wasn't for others. It was for you. Only for you. Because it was your heart that needed awakening, not the whole world's. Because it was your soul that wandered off, not your neighbor's. Because it was you who needed to be shaken, you who needed to be stopped, you who needed to be brought back before you got too lost. What you're experiencing isn't a collective storm. It's an individual conversation. A conversation that doesn't take place with words, but with events, with emotions, with losses, with openings. A conversation where every detail counts, every blockage has meaning, every breakup has a place, every unexpected event pushes you towards a point you would never have considered on your own. You know, there's something you've been trying to suppress for a long time. A subtle feeling at first, like a slight shiver in your chest. Something you pushed away every time it came back. You told yourself, it'll pass. I've got this. I'll get through it. You masked this feeling with activities, with going out, with work, with screens. Anything to avoid facing what's silently rumbling inside. But despite everything, despite your efforts, despite your denial, despite your detours, this feeling has returned. Stronger, more pressing, more disturbing. And you know very well what feeling I'm talking about. This inner urgency. That strange feeling that something in your life has to change. Not tomorrow, not when you're ready, not when you've sorted out your problems, but now, right now. As if your soul was sending you a distress signal that you can no longer ignore. And yet, you try. You put on a mask. You keep smiling. You just use stock phrases to convince others, and maybe even yourself, that everything's fine, that it's just a phase, that it'll be okay. But you know it's not true. Because at night, when the world sleeps, when there's no more noise to drown out your conscience, that's when the real confrontation begins. You feel this heaviness on your heart, this insistent thought that keeps coming back like a reminder you didn't ask for, but can no longer run from. You feel you're heading straight for something that no longer suits you, something that drains you, that damages you, that distances you from the person you were meant to become. And the urgency, it's there for that reason. It's not a coincidence. It's not your imagination. It's not an emotional whim. It's an intervention, an impulse and a direction, a spiritual recalibration, a divinely placed movement in your heart at the precise moment you needed it, but perhaps not at the moment you would have chosen. Because if you're waiting for the right moment, know that it doesn't exist. Or rather, it doesn't exist according to your criteria. It exists according to a different timing. A timing that doesn't depend on your availability, your comfort, your plans, your mood, or even your emotional state. It exists according to your soul, according to what it risks losing if you continue like this, according to what must be saved before it's too late. What you're feeling right now isn't an external warning. It's an internal one, a kind of emergency alarm, triggered because you've stayed too long in a state that you've normalized, but that isn't normal. You've gotten used to living disconnected. You've gotten used to moving forward without direction. You've gotten used to carrying a tired heart as if it were new. You've gotten used to the emptiness, to the noise, to the lack of clarity, to the confusion, to this feeling of going around in circles in your own life. And now, your soul refuses to go on like this. You wonder why this feeling comes so suddenly. Why now, when you thought you had time? Why all of a sudden does your inner self start screaming out what you've been running from for months, even years? Do you want the truth? Because there are times when you go too far in a direction that isn't meant for you. And when you cross a certain line, there are calls you can no longer ignore. Not because anyone wants to force you, but because you're losing yourself, and you don't even realize it anymore. So this feeling of urgency, this strange pressure, this deep intuition, it's not a coincidence. It's a door, an invisible door that has just opened before you, and that may not stay open for long. And if you ignore it, you will feel that heaviness again, that inner turmoil, that unexplained unease, because you will not be allowed to remain spiritually asleep when your soul still has something to accomplish. And you know it. You feel it. You can no longer pretend you don't know. This inner urgency, it is not the end of something. It is the beginning of something. Something that is being prepared, something that is calling to you, something you haven't yet understood, but that you will have to face. Because what awaits you right after this moment, right after this realization, right after this inner opening, will demand something of you that you hadn't imagined until now. Look around you, not with a quick, distracted, mechanical glance. No, look with the clarity you've been avoiding for far too long. Observe the imperceptible movements of your life. Observe what changes. Observe what disappears. Observe what appears. You think these events are isolated. You think they're just ordinary ups and downs. You think that's life, simply. But look closer. Nothing is insignificant. Every movement in your life is intentional. Every person who drifts away, every door that closes, every opportunity that crumbles. All of this is part of a larger plan that you don't yet have the spiritual maturity to see clearly. You think you're losing. You think you're failing. You think you're falling apart. But sometimes, loss is just the first step toward alignment. Look at what you've been through these past few months. The relationships that broke down without explanation. The projects that didn't come to fruition. The doors that slammed shut just when you thought you were ready. The inner exhaustion that surprised you when you thought you were stronger than it. The loneliness you've been carrying like a shadow for a while now. None of this is a coincidence. None of this is pointless. None of this is against you. There are realignments that can only happen in chaos. Rebirths that can only begin after destruction. New paths that only become visible when the old ones abruptly disappear. You've already felt it, haven't you? That moment when life snatched something away from you so powerfully that you thought you'd never recover. And yet, years later, you thank Allah for that rupture, even though at the time, you thought you were going to die. So why do you think that what's happening to you now doesn't also have a sacred dimension? You only see the suffering, but you don't see the preparation. You see the closure, but you don't see the protection. You see the tension, but you don't see the transformation. When Allah wants to transform someone, He begins by shaking out what needed to be released. Sometimes gently, sometimes violently. Because some things only leave your heart when they are torn from it. Then He overturns what was holding you back. The illusions, the dependencies, the false securities, the attachments that were suffocating you, the paths you were heading in, believing you'd find peace when they were nothing but disguised dead ends. And sometimes, all of this happens immediately. Not in 6 months. Not when you feel better. Not when you're ready, now. Because your destiny can no longer wait. Because you had settled into a state that was hurting you. Because you had normalized a level of spiritual exhaustion that would lead you astray. Because you were living in a dead zone. A zone where your soul no longer breathed. So, a movement was needed. A shock, a reversal, a reminder, a rupture to save what needed saving. And look closely. Observe the precision. Nothing collapsed before the exact moment it needed to. Nothing changed too soon. Nothing moved too late. The jolt has arrived now. Because now, you're at a point in your life where if you continue as before, you'll lose something precious. Yourself. You may feel like everything around you is falling apart. But what if it's not a collapse, but a rebuilding? What if what seems to be disappearing is actually making room for something much bigger? Something you would never have sought on your own? Something you would never have dared to ask for, out of fear, out of doubt, or because you thought you didn't deserve it? There are times in life when you can no longer stay where you are. You've outgrown this old chapter. Your soul is suffocating in clothes that no longer fit. You're trying to hold on to a past that prevents you from reaching your full potential. So things fall apart. Not to punish you, to force you to become the version of yourself you refuse to become, but you are destined to be. And perhaps it's there, at the precise moment when you look at your life without understanding, that you finally realize it's not a collapse, but an announcement. The silent, urgent, inevitable announcement that another chapter is calling you. A chapter you haven't yet dared to open, but which is approaching you faster than you imagine. If you feel this urgency in your heart, this need to change, to return, to understand, don't ignore it. This kind of call doesn't come often, and when it does, you mustn't let it pass. Take a moment to reconnect, to purify your intention, to make your heart a place where the light can enter. And if you want to keep moving forward, to understand the signs in your life, and to strengthen your connection with Allah in a deep and authentic way, then subscribe, turn on notifications, and join this community that, like you, is seeking clarity, peace, and meaning. Because sometimes, guidance arrives the moment you decide to listen.